two people earn $60,000 a year at the same company. One of them finishes the year with nothing left over. The other one finishes with about $10,800 invested. Neither is more disciplined than the other. Neither one budgets, tracks spending in an app, or skips the coffee. The only difference is the order in which their money moves. For the first person, the paycheck lands in a bank account, then bills come out, then life happens, and whatever survives gets saved, which is almost always nothing, because life expands to fill the space available. For the second person, a portion gets taken out before the paycheck ever reaches the account, then bills, then life. Life still expands to fill the space available. There is just less space. That is the whole system, and it is not a secret. It is a sequence, and the sequence is the only thing that differs between them. I'm Tom. This channel is about real personal finance, the kind that works for normal people instead of the kind that sells you something. No motivational fluff, no fantasy returns, no get rich quick. Just what the math actually does over time. If that is what you want, hit subscribe. That sequence has a name on each side of it, and the names are worth knowing. Most people build income moments. A paycheck arrives, gets consumed, and the process resets. Next month, you start from the same place, and the month after that. The alternative is an income loop. Money arrives, part of it gets diverted into something that produces more money, and that production gets diverted again. The difference is not how much arrives. It is whether any of it is routed somewhere it can come back from. A paycheck that gets fully spent is a moment, and it leaves nothing behind. A paycheck that leaves 18% behind in an account paying dividends is the beginning of a loop. The loop is the only part that compounds. One piece of evidence settles the argument about whether this is really about discipline. Vanguard studies nearly 5 million American retirement savers every year. Their most recent report looked at two groups of workers. In companies where employees had to actively sign up for the retirement plan, 64% participated. In companies where employees were enrolled automatically and had to actively opt out, 94% participated. The same kind of workers, on comparable salaries, in comparable plans. 30 percentage points of difference produced entirely by which option was the default. Vanguard's own conclusion is worth quoting almost directly. The driver of successful retirement saving is not motivation, financial literacy, or income level. It is the structural design of the plan. If you have ever blamed yourself for not saving, that number is worth sitting with. More than a third of the people in those voluntary plans were not lazy. They were the same kind of people who saved fine at the company down the road where the form was already filled in. So the question is not how do I become more disciplined, it is how do I get the decision made once in advance so that discipline is never required. Your paycheck passes through 4 checkpoints on its way to you. At each one, money can be pulled out before you ever see it. They are worth going through in order because the first 2 cost you almost nothing and the last 2 are where the effort lives. Checkpoint 1 happens before the money is even yours. Most employers will add money to your retirement account if you add money to it. The usual arrangement is 50 cents for every dollar you put in, up to about 6% of your pay. Contribute 6% of a $60,000 salary, and the company adds $1,800 a year. That $1,800 is not redirected from anything. It is money that did not exist until you contributed, and it goes straight from the company into your account. You never see it, so you cannot spend it, which makes it the cleanest version of this whole system. Roughly 1 in 5 eligible workers turns it down by contributing less than the threshold. Checkpoint 2 happens before the tax. Your paycheck normally has income tax taken out, and you receive what is left. Money going into a pre-tax retirement account skips that step. It leaves your pay before the government takes its share. Say you put $6,000 a year into that account and you are in the 22% bracket. $6,000 goes in, but your take-home pay only drops by about $4,700. The other $1,300 was tax you were going to pay regardless. So the account gains $6,000 and your life loses $4,700. The gap is not a trick or a loophole. It is tax that never got collected on money you were not keeping anyway. Checkpoint 3 is the first one that costs full price, and it is the first one that requires anything of you. An automatic transfer, scheduled on payday, from your bank account into an investment account. It leaves before you have looked at the balance. Say $3,000 a year, which is $250 a month. Every dollar of that comes out of your take-home pay with no help from the company or the tax code. That is why it goes third. Set up the 2 cheap checkpoints first, Then add this one. Checkpoint 4 does more work than any of the other three, and most people have never heard of it. Many plans offer an automatic annual increase. You set it once, and every year your contribution rate rises by 1 percentage point without you touching anything. Run the difference on that same $60,000 salary. Contribute a flat 6% for 25 years, and you build about $228,000. Now switch on the annual increase, rising 1 point a year until it caps at 15%. Identical salary, identical starting rate over the same 25 years. $454,000, $226,000 of difference from a single checkbox. It works because a 1% increase is invisible. On $60,000, it is $50 a month, and it lands at the same time as your annual raise, so your take-home pay usually goes up anyway. Vanguard reports that over 70% of plans with automatic enrollment now include this feature. Most people who have access to it have never switched it on. Now stack them: $1,800 from the employer, $6,000 pre-tax, and $3,000 automatic. That is $10,800 a year going into investments, or 18% of a $60,000 salary. Everything from here assumes that figure stays flat with no annual increase. Switch on Checkpoint 4 and every number that follows gets larger. Now, the number that makes this possible for an ordinary household. Your take-home pay does not fall by $10,800. The employer's $1,800 was never yours to spend. The $6,000 pre-tax only cost you $4,700. Only the $3,000 automatic transfer comes out at full price. Your take-home actually falls by about $7,680 a year. That is $640 a month. $640 of reduced spending puts $10,800 a year into the system. That is the leverage nobody mentions. For every dollar you give up, $1.40 goes to work. Run that for 25 years at a 7% return after inflation, which is roughly what American stocks have delivered over the long run. $683,000. Run it for 30 and it passes $1 million. From a $60,000 salary, and from giving up $640 a month of spending. No side business, no property, no picking stocks. So why do so few people do this? It has nothing to do with the arithmetic. Money that has not been named gets spent. When a bonus arrives, or a tax refund, or a raise, most people do not decide to spend it. They simply have not decided anything else, and unassigned money defaults to consumption. Give the same money a job and it behaves differently, not because you became more virtuous, because a decision already made does not have to be made again while you are standing in a shop. Most households experience a version of this every year without noticing. A tax refund arrives, $2,000 say. It gets described as free money, which it is not, because it was your money all along and the government held it interest-free. Ask somebody in March what that refund is for, and most will not have an answer. By June it is gone, and they could not tell you where. Now send the same $2,000 into an investment account on the day it lands. You will not miss it either. That is the part worth holding on to. In both versions, the money vanishes from your attention. In only one of them does it still exist in 20 years. This is why the automatic transfer works, and a monthly intention does not. The transfer is a decision made once in a calm moment that then executes itself every month regardless of how you feel on the 15th. An intention is a decision you have to make 12 times a year, every time against something you actually want. You will lose that argument eventually, and not because you are weak. Everybody does, because 12 chances a year to say no is 11 too many. Treating this as something to set up later has a price. The same $10,800 a year run for 25 years, builds $683,000. Run for 20 years, it builds $443,000. 5 years of delay costs $240,000. That is not a moral point about procrastination, and I am not interested in making one. It is the arithmetic of a system whose entire output depends on how long it has been running. The title deserves an honest answer. Do rich people not want you to know this? No. And I am not going to build a video on a premise I do not believe. Every piece of this is public. The employer match is described in your benefits documents. Your pre-tax account is a line in the tax code, and that automatic transfer is a button in your banking app. Nobody is hiding any of it. What is true and what is worth being angry about is something more specific. The system is optional for you and automatic for them. Somebody with a corporate compensation package has money routed into retirement accounts, deferred compensation, and stock plans before they ever see a paycheck. It is built into how they get paid. Somebody paid hourly has to construct all of that themselves from scratch using their own attention, and they do it against income that is fully spendable the moment it arrives. The rules governing both people are identical. The defaults are not, and the defaults are what decide outcomes for most people. Which brings me back to that Vanguard number, 94% versus 64%. The difference between those two groups was not knowledge or character, it was who had to fill in a form. So the goal is not to learn to be the kind of person who saves. It is to change your own defaults until saving happens without your involvement. Go back to the two people I started with and run them out. Both earned $60,000. Both got the same raises. Neither one budgeted or tracked spending, and neither felt deprived. The first one has been living on their full take-home pay for 25 years. Their standard of living has been slightly higher the entire time by about $640 a month. The second one has $683,000. The first person did not waste that $640 a month on anything foolish. It went into a slightly better car, a slightly nicer holiday, a slightly larger house. Ordinary things, chosen one at a time, none of which felt like a decision about retirement. That is the actual trade, not deprivation against wealth. A marginally smaller life for 25 years against a completely different position at the end of them. Whether that trade is worth making is a genuine question, and I'm not going to answer it for you. What I will say is that most people never make the trade because they never see it presented as one. Now the honest part, because this system does not work for everybody equally, the first limit is income. Somebody whose entire paycheck goes to rent, food, transport, and medicine does not have $640 a month to redirect. Telling them to automate a transfer is not advice. For that household, the lever is income, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. The checkpoint system is what you build once there is something to route. The second limit is debt. If you are carrying a credit card balance at 22%, the automatic transfer to investments is the wrong destination. The same money against that card earns a guaranteed 22%, and no investment matches that. Set the third checkpoint up anyway and point it at the card until the card is gone, then redirect it. That sequencing matters more than it sounds. Build the habit while the money goes to debt, and when the debt clears, the system is already running. The money simply changes destination. Wait until the debt is gone to build it, and you start from nothing. At the exact moment, the freed up cash feels like a raise. The third limit is that the employer match only exists if your employer offers one. Millions of people work somewhere that does not, and for them, the first layer of the system is simply missing. The version that works there is an IRA with an automatic transfer, which is the same mechanism without the free money on top. An IRA is a retirement account you open yourself at any major broker. The 2026 limit is $7,500 a year, or $8,500 if you are 50 or older. You set the transfer to run on payday, and it behaves exactly like a workplace deduction, except you built it. That is a genuine disadvantage compared to somebody with a match, and it is worth naming rather than glossing over. What it is not is a reason to skip the system. And the fourth is that 7% is a long-run average, not a schedule. Some decades deliver much less. I ran every 10-year stretch in the last century of American returns, and 4 of 91 finished negative. So what should you actually do this week? Find out whether your employer offers a match and what the threshold is. If you are contributing less than that threshold, you are turning down a raise you have already been offered. That is the single highest return action available to almost anybody watching this. Then, on the same page of that website, look for the automatic annual increase and switch it on. That is checkpoint 4, and on the numbers above it was worth $226,000. Both settings sit in the same place, and most people have not opened that page since the day they were hired. Then set one automatic transfer on payday for an amount small enough that you are not tempted to cancel it. The size of that transfer is where people talk themselves out of starting, so let me remove that excuse. $50 a month, run for 25 years at 7% becomes about $38,000. $100 a month becomes $76,000. $250 becomes $190,000. None of those is a retirement on its own. Everyone is a real number that would not otherwise exist, and the mechanism is identical at every size. Somebody transferring $50 a month has the same system as somebody transferring $1,000. They differ in scale, not in structure, and scale is the part that changes as your income does. Structure is the part that gets built once, and it is easier to build at $50 than it will ever be later. And then leave all of it alone, because the entire value of the system is that it removes you from the decision. The people who build wealth on ordinary salaries are not making better choices than you every month. They made 4 choices once, several years ago, and then stopped choosing. That is the whole system. It was never hidden. It was just never automatic for you, the way it is for somebody with a corporate compensation package. Building it takes an afternoon. Running it takes nothing at all, and that is the entire point. A system, you have to remember, is not a system. It is a chore you will eventually stop doing. If this was worth your time, hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.